So I've traveled all the way here to Korea where the weather is quite frightful to see if this thing is delightful. Good thing they don't pay me for my jokes. So now that the rain has let up, I can talk to you a little bit about what the EV3 is. And what it is a very small electric SUV. It's actually very similar in size to the Chevrolet Bolt EUV that was discontinued. And for some perspective, it's about 18 inches shorter than a Tesla Model Y, making it firmly subcompact and great for cities like this, like Seoul. If the name sounds familiar, that's because Kia already sells an EV6 and an EV9. And those are both vehicles that we really like and that we think are very good looking. But I think that I might like the EV3 styling the best of them all for a couple of reasons. The EV6 is a great looking vehicle, but for me it's always been a little bit too swoopy, a little bit alien. And the EV9 looks great as well, but it's probably a touch too boxy. The EV3 sort of combines the styling from those two vehicles, and I think that the proportions of it are just absolutely perfect. And of course, as with the other two vehicles, we love the wheels. Kia's done a great job with the wheels that it offers on pretty much all of its vehicles, gas powered and electric powered lately. And this EV3 GT line that we're looking at is no exception. Just like how the exterior has a lot of elements of the EV9, there are even more EV9 elements here on the interior, and that is a good thing. You have basically the same exact layout, this sort of single screen here that contains the instrument cluster, the climate controls, and the infotainment. And down here, it's actually very open. Kia has actually shrunk down the hardware needed to power the HVAC system, and they say that that allows them to sort of move up this dash line here. So the front just feels incredibly roomy. Materials are excellent for this class and price range. I like the choice of using this sort of cloth material on the dash, and as I look around, I don't really see any piano black trim, so another A+ there from me. This gets the new version of Kia's infotainment, which means that you're getting wireless Android Auto and wireless Apple CarPlay, and you also get, of course, a wireless charging pad down here and 2 USB-C charging ports as well. What's kind of weird is that here in the center console, there's actually no storage. That's because you get this sort of table that you can actually slide out here, and this becomes a nice stand for if you want to have lunch, or you can actually even put a laptop on here. That's pretty nice. Also like that these buttons here give you haptic feedback, so you know exactly when you're pressing them. There is one thing that's not so great, and that's something it shares with the EV9, and that is sort of this climate control screen here. Number one, you can't see it. So if I'm sitting here where I like to drive, the wheel actually just takes out a big chunk of the screen. And there are some functions that you have to do here. The nice thing is though that there are temperature and fan speed controls here, so you get some of those at least more tactile, but for other things like turning on recirculate or the AC, you have to go through that screen, and to see it, you're gonna kind of have to like lean over like this just so you can get a good look at it. Even though the EV3 by its exterior dimensions is not the biggest vehicle, I have to say sitting up here in the front seat, it feels really large. It feels to me in some ways bigger than the EV6 does, and that's because of the way the dash sort of tucks up here, and also because you have excellent visibility with really big windows all around. And on top of that, you also get this excellent surround view camera system, which in addition to the EV3's compact size, just makes it super easy to move around in tight spaces. In addition to having a very expansive feeling front seat, the back seat is also really good as well. Kia did such a good job packaging this vehicle and cramming all this stuff into such a small footprint. Case in point, this chair is set up where I like to drive. I'm just under 6 feet tall, and as you can see, I still have plenty of leg room, plenty of headroom, and this seat is also really comfortable, and it can also recline even more if I want it to. And in this position, I could spend a lot of time in this second row and not feel cramped at all. The backseat passengers are also going to get air vents and 2 USB-C charging ports, and of course these nice little switches on the side of the front seat so I can actually move the seat up if I need to get it out of the way. This interior is just, and this is no surprise, just like the EV6 and EV9, very well thought out. Like all the things that you would need are within arm's reach. It's comfortable, roomy, and if this is the future of what a small sort of electric SUV is, sign me up. The EV3 offers just over 16 cubic feet of cargo room behind its back seat, which as you can see easily fits our Pelican case and my backpack, and can probably fit a few pieces of luggage, but not really much more than that. So we're behind the wheel of a single motor GT line, but instead of the single motor being on the rear, here in the EV3 it's in the front, unlike on the EV6. That single motor in this vehicle is putting out just over 200 horsepower and just over 200 pounds-feet of torque as well. Now, Kia quotes a 0 to 62 mile an hour time of 7.7 seconds for this vehicle. From driving around the city today, it feels close to that. It's probably a little bit quicker. I would say when we get it out to our test track, it'll probably somewhere in the 7-second range, but that is totally fine. I think we live in an age where some people feel that EVs have to be sub 5-second vehicles to be worthwhile, and I don't think that that's the case. When we're driving this around the cities and even the highways here in Seoul, we never really felt that it was underpowered. They merge fine, you can get through little gaps in the city fine because that power does all come instantly. And I think that this might be a better way to sort of go about these cheaper EVs, especially where they don't need to be super fast. And if you have a less powerful motor, that actually makes it more efficient, so you're able to get more range out of smaller batteries, things like that. I just kind of like the philosophy behind the EV3 a lot in that regard. Now, this being on the same platform as the EV6 and 9, as we said earlier, means that it does have some similar driving characteristics to those other two vehicles. So it's no surprise that I like the way that this one drives, just like the way those do. There is nothing really surprising about it. Is it like the best handling vehicle? No. Is the steering rack super tight? No, but it knows what it is. It's easy to keep it pointed straight on the highway. You don't have to do a lot of corrections. And even though the steering feel is light, that really sort of works for a city vehicle like this, where you're going to be doing a lot of maneuvering in tight spaces. What I did find surprising about this vehicle, though, was just how well it rides. Now, it helps that in Korea, the roads are pretty immaculate. I wish that we had this Korean infrastructure at home where it seems like potholes are a thing of the past. But out here, even though the roads are good, it's still impressive how well this vehicle rides, and especially how quiet it is. This vehicle is on the larger wheels, which means that you have less sidewall, and that can mean, you know, some choppiness, but the whole day today, it's just been extremely comfortable, extremely quiet. You can have conversations without raising your voice at all. You can even have them maybe at a whisper and still be able to hear the person next to you. It's just an incredibly smooth driving experience, and in some ways, it feels almost luxurious. There's not quite the suppleness to the ride that you're going to get in a luxury vehicle, but in terms of how the cabin sort of looks and feels, how the suspension feels, it drives like a car that costs maybe twice as much. Kia is also introducing a new feature on the EV3, and that is iPedal 3.0. What is iPedal 3.0? That's a great question. And it basically means that now you can use one pedal driving no matter what regen setting you're at. So it used to be that you only get one pedal driving at the maximum regen setting. And so that meant that if you, let's say, didn't want to use maximum regen, you find it to be a little bit jerky, you don't really like the way that it slows down, you can now go to no regen or less regen and still use one pedal driving. All of Kia's vehicles, even the Niro, which is on a different platform, they have a really well-tuned regenerative braking. So I've never actually had a complaint about how the vehicles drove, but now that you have this added level of customization, I have discovered that my ideal setting is not max regen. I actually kind of like toning it down a level or two, making the vehicle feel like it drives a bit more naturally, but still being able to get that one pedal driving so you don't have to touch the brake, especially if you're driving in the city. And it just adds another layer of customization to the driving experience where you can really tailor the EV3 to behave the way you want. So I'm pretty enamored with this single motor version of the EV3, and if you're wondering, is a dual motor all-wheel drive version coming? Yes, it is, but we don't know exactly when. This is a version that will go on sale first in Europe and South Korea, but we won't be getting this vehicle in the US until sometime in the 2026 calendar year. So probably between now and then, the all-wheel drive version will have come out and they will launch it in the US market in both single motor and dual motor versions. But I can't see there being really any reason for us to like the all-wheel drive version any less. You'll probably get a little bit less range than you will out of this one just because it's not quite as efficient with the dual motors, but I would say that most of the impressions that we have here today will apply exactly to the all-wheel drive version as well, and that's great news. I want to give a quick shout out to the unsung hero of this trip, and that is the EV3's native navigation system. Now, this is a system that I don't love in the United States, but in Korea, it's got some added functionality, and without it, we would have gotten very lost around Seoul because the roads there are kind of complicated and the signs aren't always in English. but the navigation system always tells you exactly what lane to be in and how to navigate those color-coded roads around Seoul. And on top of that, it also pays all of your road tolls right in the system, and that is some functionality that I would love to see integrated in the United States, but I'm not holding my breath. Now it's time for us to talk about range and charging, and since we're here at a charging station, we'll start with that. Now, this is also on the same platform as the EV6 and the EV9, but those are on an 800 volt architecture, while here, this is on a 400 volt architecture. And what that means is that it doesn't quite charge as fast as the other vehicles. Both of those vehicles are very high up on the Edmunds charging test leaderboard. They're very good at putting a lot of power back in that battery very quickly. But here, this is going to top out at 130 kilowatts for vehicles like this one with a larger battery, and if you have the smaller battery, that tops out at 100 kilowatts. And what that means is that to go from 10 to 80% charge, it does take longer in the EV3 than it does in the EV6 and the EV9. Both of those vehicles, they can recharge in about 20 minutes. This one will take you about 30 minutes, so it's just a little bit longer. Now, even though the EV3 is smaller, it's got a pretty big battery pack. The battery pack of this vehicle is just over 80 kilowatt hours, and that is bigger than the battery pack that was in the EV6 until it got an upgrade for the 2025 model year. Let's talk about range. So we don't have any EPA estimates for this vehicle yet because it won't be arriving until 2026. What we do have is the WLTP estimate, and that is 372.8 miles, which is a ton of range for any vehicle, let alone one that's going to come in at this price. Now, those numbers, they don't directly translate to EPA figures, but what I was able to do was look up the WLTP figures for the EV6 and EV9 versus our Edmunds tested figures on our Edmunds EV range test. So for the EV6, it came in at just over 320 miles of range. In the EV9, it was basically spot on with that at just over 300 miles of range. And what that tells us is that that WLTP figure for the Kias is coming in somewhat close to what we're getting on the Edmunds EV range test. And if that's true of this vehicle, your miles per dollar goes very, very far in the EV3. I've really enjoyed my time here in Korea with the EV3. There are a few questions that are still yet to be answered about this vehicle. Obviously the biggest one being price. So Kia has sort of alluded to pricing, but not really locked down those figures for the US market yet. They've sort of said it will come in at around starting in the mid 30,000s and maybe end up on the top end for like a dual motor with all the bells and whistles for around $50,000 if I had to guess, but we won't get more details on that until later on. The other question I had was about this new ChatGPT powered AI voice assistant that the vehicle has, which I did try to use here in Korea and kind of try to ask it like some fun questions like, you know, what's a good Korean barbecue restaurant around here and stuff like that. But it's actually not set up for English yet, although they've told me that when the vehicle launches in the US, that will be fully operational. So we'll get a chance to test that down the line. My time in the EV3 has really just made me even more impatient for this vehicle to go on sale in the US. I think it actually fits a hole in the market that nothing else really satisfies right now. Volvo's EX30 was supposed to be kind of similarly sized, priced, and have similar range, but no word yet on when that's even going to go on sale. So I think that there's a really big market for an affordable EV that really doesn't have a lot of compromises. Here in the EV3, you're still getting really good interior room. You're getting a lot of style and panache too. And if the EV3 can come in close to its WLTP figure in our range testing, like the EV6 and EV9 did, that would actually move it into the top 10 of our range leaderboard. And if you look at all the other vehicles up there, they all cost a lot more money than this EV3 will. Here in this job, we're pretty lucky. We get to drive a lot of vehicles, and we get to drive a lot of vehicles that we really like. But for me personally, I don't drive many vehicles these days where I come away from the experience and I think, yeah, I would spend my own money to buy that vehicle. As I've been driving around here in the EV3, that thought has crossed my mind like 2 or 3 times. This would kind of be almost a perfect vehicle for me. Living in Los Angeles, the form factor is great. I love the way it looks. I really, really enjoy the way it drives and how comfortable it is. And of course, the fact that it's got these fantastic EV9 headrests that I really love as well. This thing's a total package. There's really no way around it. And just the only unfortunate thing is that we're gonna have to wait for it a while. And they say good things come to those who wait, but I guess sometimes great things do too. Thanks for watching. Take two. Okay, there we go.